In the year 3174, in the distant outer rim of the Andorran Spiral, there existed a world known to very few, Valora 9. It was a planet of deep oceans, soft golden forests, and skies that shimmered with gentle violet clouds. The beings who lived there, called the Valari, had never known war. Their society was built on peace, harmony, and understanding. They had no soldiers, no weapons, and no desire to conquer or defend. Their greatest achievements were symphonies that could move hearts, paintings that told stories across generations, and floating libraries filled with the wisdom of stars. They believed the universe would return to them what they gave to it: kindness. And for centuries that seemed true. Then came the darkness. Without warning, the skies of Valora 9 filled with shapes that blocked the sun, massive black ships with engines that roared like thunder and hulls marked with the cruel sigil of the Zarn raiders. The Valari had only heard whispers of these beings, merciless conquerors who swept through weak worlds and harvested them like crops. When the first plasma bolt hit the outer gardens of Telvasha, the Valari capital, the ground trembled and the forests burned blue with flame. Their temples, once glowing with light, shattered beneath the boots of alien invaders. The Zarn did not come to negotiate. They came to take. Their machines walked like giants, crushing trees and homes. Their soldiers moved through the cities, with cold precision, capturing Valari leaders, disabling their learning towers, and destroying their song spheres. The Valari, gentle and unarmed, scattered like petals in the wind. They ran into the wilds, hid beneath the ruins of their libraries, and sent silent prayers to the stars, hoping someone would notice their world was dying. In the final days of the invasion's beginning, as the last communication towers fell and the flames reached the steps of the Valari High Hall, a group of engineers and philosophers, those who still remembered the old technology of deep space, gathered in a hidden underground observatory. They didn't carry weapons, but they had something else: hope. With trembling hands, they activated a long-range subspace beacon. There was no time for complicated messages or coded transmissions. They had only moments, and so they filled the signal with pure emotion, grief, terror, and a plea woven through the energy waves. They sent their pain across the stars. The cry wasn't in words. It was in heartbeats, in pulses of fear and fading light, in the final breaths of a peaceful people. The message shot into the void, far beyond their dying world. It passed nebulae and asteroid fields, crossed abandoned satellite clusters, and, curved through forgotten trade lanes, it moved faster than any ship ever could, carried by waves of desperate energy. And then, silence. Days passed, then weeks. The Valari, now prisoners in their own cities, heard nothing. The skies above were still filled with the growl of Zarn fighters. Their songs had gone quiet. Their hope had begun to fade. The invaders mocked them, their harsh voices echoing through the shattered streets. "No one is coming," they said. "No one hears your cries." And maybe they were right. The galaxy was vast, and Valora 9 was nothing more than a small, peaceful planet in the middle of nowhere. What army would come for a race that had nothing to give but books and songs? The Valari had no allies, no great warriors, no fleets waiting in the dark, only their signal, only their cry. And still, they waited, underground, beneath the ashes of their once glowing world, staring up at the stars through cracks in the stone, wondering if somewhere out there, someone still cared enough to listen. What the Zarn didn't know, what the Valari had no way of seeing, was that across the galaxy, far beyond their spiral arm, a lone listening post floated quietly near the edge of the Orion Barrier, where human space met the unknown. And there, a young officer with tired eyes leaned forward, blinking at the strange pulse on her screen. It wasn't just a pattern. It wasn't just noise. It was something else. something alive. And in that moment, across light years of distance, something impossible happened. The cry had been heard. The signal that reached the edge of human territory did not come with coordinates or language, yet it pierced through static like a whisper in a storm. Floating silently near the Orion barrier, a vast invisible wall of radiation and silence, the human listening post named Outpost Echo operated mostly without excitement. Its job was simple: to scan, to record, and to report anything unusual. Most days passed without anything beyond drifting asteroid readings and old space junk transmissions. But on that quiet day, something stirred. A faint pulse, rhythmic, and emotional, far more than just data. It was intercepted by Lieutenant Commander Mira Lane, a woman known for listening longer and deeper than anyone else. Some called her stubborn, others called her sensitive. But all knew that when Mira leaned in, she heard things machines often missed. When the strange signal appeared on her console, she didn't ignore it. Instead, she isolated it, amplified it, and played it aloud in the control room. The sound wasn't exactly a voice, but a vibration that tugged at the heart. The room fell silent. Technicians stopped their routine checks. Even hardened space veterans stood still. Within that signal lived something raw: fear, sadness, and something else too: a plea. The message had no origin tag, but its frequency hinted it had traveled impossibly far. The emotion it carried made it feel close, like a cry pressed against one's chest. Mira analyzed the pulse structure and confirmed what she already knew in her gut. This wasn't a natural phenomenon or an accidental transmission. It was deliberate. It was a cry for help. Protocol required her to report it to Earth Central Command, so she did. A long report was filed, sent through official channels with exact data points and emotional readings. Several days later, a cold reply came back. Observation noted. Do not engage. No mission would be approved. No fleet would be dispatched. The galaxy was too large, the situation too vague, the cost too high. The Zarn raiders, Mira knew, had been seen before. Pirates turned conquerors. They were considered a nuisance. Dangerous, yes, but not worth the trouble of full confrontation unless they reached human systems. Valora 9, as it turned out, was not a known world in any major database. It had no trade routes, no mineral wealth, no alliance pacts. And so Earth looked away. But Mira Lane did not. The denial from Central Command did not stop her thoughts, nor did it silence the weight she felt every time she replayed that signal in her quarters. Every night she stared at the stars through the wide window of the station and wondered about the ones who had sent it. What kind of people sent a signal like that and then waited? What were they doing now? Hiding, fleeing, suffering? Perhaps dying. The thought haunted her. A week later, she made her decision. Mira Lane called in favors, pulled strings, and convinced a few like-minded souls to join her. Most of the younger officers had never seen real combat, but they had hearts that still believed in right and wrong. She returned to her old command ship, the Starblade, a sleek but aging Corvette-class vessel from the last Outer Rim conflict. It had seen better days, but its engines still burned bright, and its stealth capabilities remained unmatched in the right hands. With only a small crew of 28, she set a course using a patchwork of data from the signal's origin. She didn't expect medals. She didn't expect thanks. She simply couldn't sit by and do nothing. The voyage to the far region of Valora 9 star system took days of hyperspace travel through rough and uncharted pockets of space. Along the way, the crew grew silent, perhaps realizing that they were heading into danger with no backup and no guarantee of survival. But no one turned back. When the Starblade dropped out of hyperspace near the orbit of Valora 9, the planet loomed like a wounded jewel, its clouds thick with smoke trails, and its cities marked by deep scorch lines visible even from orbit. No, transmissions came from the surface. Scans showed heavy patrols, strange energy fields, and a growing network of Zarn ships parked like watchdogs in orbit. The crew watched the visuals with growing tension, but Mira remained steady. Orders came calmly. Cloak the ship. Observe patterns. Look for openings. The Starblade glided through the shadows of broken satellites and asteroid debris, completely invisible to the occupying forces. Mira knew a direct assault would mean death, but she also knew something the Zarn didn't. Humans were not always loud. Sometimes they struck like whispers in the dark. Using a combination of stealth drones and long-range scanning, the Starblade's crew mapped the major Zarn strongholds and traced weak communication spots. It wasn't long before they found signs of life hidden beneath the surface, in the ruins, in collapsed caverns, and beneath burned-out cities. The Valari, or what was left of them, had survived. Mira saw them through drone footage, thin, pale, and frightened, their luminous eyes staring up at the cameras in disbelief. A child reached toward the lens. An elder pressed his palm against a shattered crystal wall. They had no words, but the message was clear. You came. Deep in the command bay of the Starblade, Mira Lane stood in silence as the images played across the screen. Behind her, the crew began to move, preparing gear, adjusting settings, loading up supplies. The signal had been heard. The cry had not vanished into the void. And now, in the orbit of a forgotten world, one small ship and a few determined souls were ready to answer it, not because they were ordered, not because they were heroes, but because something deep within them said this was worth fighting for, even if no one else believed it. The Starblade hovered silently above Valora 9, hidden from the prying sensors of the Zarn raiders who patrolled the skies, unaware of the humans beneath them. Mira Lane stood at the command console, her gaze fixed on the planet below. The Valari had been crushed, their peaceful civilization shattered by the brutal force of the invaders. Yet, amid the destruction, there was still a glimmer of hope. The Valari were not all gone. There were survivors, and they were waiting, somewhere beneath the surface, hidden from the ruthless invaders. The Starblade's crew had gathered in the briefing room, their faces drawn and tense, knowing what the mission meant. No one expected a simple rescue. This was a dangerous operation, a mission with no clear end. The Zarn were formidable, ruthless, and vast in number. The Starblade, an old warship now piloted by a small, determined crew, stood no chance against the full might of the enemy fleet. But they had one advantage: stealth, and the element of surprise. Mira knew that their only hope of success was to move quickly, to find the Valari survivors before the Zarn discovered their presence. With the planet's surface under lockdown, the first step would be to infiltrate and locate the survivors. Their mission was clear. They would go in, unnoticed, rescue as many as they could, and then get out before the Zarn had any chance to retaliate. But the longer they remained in orbit, the more Mira realized that this mission was more than just a rescue. It was a test of something deeper, something she couldn't fully articulate. The Valari's cry for help had been heard by humans, a race that had once believed itself too small, too insignificant to make a difference in the vast, uncaring expanse of the universe. And now, against all odds, they were answering. She stepped away from the command console and addressed her crew. "We move out in 30 minutes, Mira said, her voice firm, steady, yet carrying the weight of the responsibility that had fallen upon her shoulders. "Our primary goal is to locate the survivors and extract them. Do not engage the enemy unless absolutely necessary. Stay low, stay silent, and stay sharp." The crew nodded, their expressions a mix of anxiety and resolve. They weren't soldiers, not in the traditional sense. Most of them had never seen battle. Yet they were here, bound by the same belief that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there was a way to help. Mira's heart swelled with pride for them. She didn't have to say more. The crew moved out to their assigned stations, preparing, the stealth drones, scanning equipment, and transport modules. They would have to use every tool at their disposal to avoid detection, from the smallest signal jammers to the carefully calibrated cloaking system that rendered the Starblade invisible to enemy sensors. As the Starblade descended into the atmosphere, Mira's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. The Volari were a peaceful people, and now they were refugees on their own world, living in the shadows, hiding beneath the crumbling remnants of their once great cities. The Zarn didn't care for their culture or their peaceful ways. To the Zarn, the Volari were simply another world to conquer, another prize to be claimed. Mira's hands clenched around the controls as she watched the surface of Valora 9 come into clearer view. The once beautiful planet now looked like a scarred and broken shell, with fires still smoldering in the wreckage of what had been their great cities. She knew that time was running out. The longer they waited, the greater the risk that the Zarn would discover them. The Starblade's sensors picked up traces of Zarn activity near the largest ruin, a once grand palace that now lay in ruins, its majestic towers reduced to rubble. Mira quickly adjusted the ship's trajectory and ordered a descent toward the wreckage. They would drop in close, near the ruins, and from there, send drones down to gather information and locate any survivors. It was risky, but it was their only chance. As the Starblade descended closer to the planet's surface, the sounds of the outside world grew louder, clashing explosions from distant skirmishes, the hum of Zarn patrols on the ground. Mira's pulse quickened. This was real. This was no longer a mission from a distance. They were on the ground, in the heart of enemy territory, with no backup and no way to call for help. The drones were deployed, their small frames slipping quietly into the atmosphere. They would be their eyes and ears, their scouts in the night. Mira watched the data streams flood her screen, feeling the tension in the pit of her stomach as the drones silently swept through the ruins of Valora 9's once glorious capital. As the drones relayed their footage, Mira saw the remnants of the Volari civilization, libraries, gardens, and temples now reduced to ash and twisted metal. But amid the destruction, there were signs of life. Faint traces of movement in the shadows. The survivors were still here, hiding, waiting for someone to find them. The drones had located a small cluster of Volari in an abandoned underground complex, their faces gaunt, their bodies weak from hunger and fear. Mira watched as one of the survivors, a young Volari woman, stepped into view, her eyes wide with disbelief when she saw the drone. She reached out, as if to touch the tiny machine, but the moment was fleeting. The drone swiftly retreated, disappearing back into the shadows, reporting its findings. The survivors were real. The cry for help had not been in vain. Mira looked at her crew, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've found them. It's time." The crew moved swiftly into action. They began preparations for the extraction, checking their gear one last time before they set out to retrieve the survivors. Mira stood at the command console, her gaze fixed on the planet below. There was no turning back now. They had come this far, and there was no way they would fail. The Volari needed them, and the mission was clear. Bring them home. As the crew prepared for the final phase of their operation, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about saving a planet. It was about something greater, a chance to show the universe that even in the darkest of times, even against the might of an empire like the Zarn, hope could still thrive. They had come for the Volari, yes, but they were also fighting for something far more important, the belief that no one, no matter how small, should ever be forgotten. And now, they were ready to answer the call. The final phase of their operation was the most dangerous, and Mira Lane knew it. The survivors were close, but the Zarn raiders were everywhere. The Starblade, hidden among the shadows of Valora 9's ruined atmosphere, was their only advantage. Mira's heart raced as she watched the crew prepare for the descent. Every second counted. The longer they waited, the greater the chance the Zarn would discover them. Every action was calculated, every movement deliberate. The tension in the command room was palpable, and the crew worked quickly, their faces a mix of determination and fear. They had come this far, and now there was no turning back. Mira stood at the center of the room, her eyes scanning the final data feeds from the drones. They had pinpointed the survivors' location, an abandoned underground facility hidden beneath the collapsed city center. The entrance was barely visible, obscured by debris and wreckage from the battle. But the drones had mapped the area, and the path was clear. The team would have to move quickly, without making a sound. One wrong move, and the Zarn would be on them in an instant. The plan was simple: land as close as possible to the entrance, extract the survivors, and return to the Starblade without being detected. It was a risky maneuver, but it was their only option. Mira turned to the crew. "We move out in 5 minutes," she said, her voice steady. "Once we're on the ground, we stick to the plan. Keep your comms silent and don't engage unless necessary. This is a rescue, not a fight. Let's get these people home." The crew nodded, and within moments, they began to file out of the command room and into the transport bay. Mira remained behind for a moment, her eyes fixed on the planet below. The sky was dark, the ground littered with the remnants of a civilization that had once thrived. Now, all that remained was ruin. She could feel the weight of the mission on her shoulders. These survivors had been waiting for someone to find them, and now they had come. She would not let them down. The transport ship, a small but agile vessel, descended silently into the atmosphere. Mira stood at the controls, her fingers dancing over the instruments with practiced precision. The ship's systems hummed quietly, its cloaking field active, rendering them invisible to the Zarn sensors. The ship slipped through the air like a shadow, undetected by the enemy. As they neared the surface, the landscape below grew clearer. The once grand city was now a wasteland, its towers reduced to rubble. Fires still burned in the distance, sending thick plumes of smoke into the sky. Mira's heart tightened as she looked at the devastation. She had seen war before, but the sheer scale of destruction here was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. The Volari had been a peaceful people. They had not deserved this. The ship touched down softly, its landing gear sinking into the ash and rubble. The crew disembarked quickly, each member wearing a tight expression of focus. They moved like shadows, blending into the destruction around them, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust that covered the ground. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and decay, but there was no time to linger. They had to move quickly. Mira led the team toward the underground facility, her mind focused entirely on the task at hand. The map from the drones had shown a hidden entrance, a narrow tunnel buried beneath the ruins. It was their only way in. As they approached the entrance, Mira signaled for the team to stop. She knelt down, scanning the ground for any signs of movement. There were no Zarn patrols in sight, but Mira knew they couldn't be far. The raiders were always watching. She glanced up at the rest of the crew. "Stay low," she whispered. "We go in fast, no hesitation. Once we're inside, we can't waste time. We need to get them out and back to the ship before the Zarn notice." The crew nodded, their faces grim. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of being on the ground in enemy territory. With one last glance at the ruins around them, Mira led the way into the tunnel. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for the entire team to move through at once. The walls were cold and damp, the air stale. Mira could hear her own breathing, the sound of her heartbeat loud in her ears. The darkness swallowed them, and the only light came from the small torches on their helmets. As they moved deeper into the tunnel, the sound of footsteps echoed off the walls. It felt like a lifetime had passed since they left the Starblade. Time had slowed down, each step heavier than the last. But then ahead, there was a soft glow, a light, faint but unmistakable. Mira's pulse quickened. They were close. She held up a hand to signal the crew to stop. Ahead, through the darkness, She could see shapes moving, Valari, crouching low, their eyes wide with fear. The survivors were here. They had made it. Mira took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She called out, her voice soft, almost a whisper, "We're here. We're here to help." The Valari hesitated for a moment, their eyes flickering with uncertainty. But then one of them, the young woman from the drone footage, stepped forward. Her face was drawn, pale from hunger and fear, but her eyes were full of something else, relief. She didn't speak, but she reached out, her trembling hand brushing against Mira's. Mira took it, her grip firm and reassuring. "We're taking you home," she said quietly. The Valari woman nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Mira turned to the rest of the crew. "It's time. Let's get them out of here." The survivors, though weak and disoriented, gathered their belongings, following Mira and her team as they made their way back to the entrance. The tunnel seemed longer now, the oppressive silence weighing down on them. Outside, the Zarn were still patrolling, unaware of the rescue mission unfolding beneath their noses. But Mira knew it wouldn't be long before they realized something was wrong. The group reached the surface just as the sun began to set. The transport ship was waiting, cloaked and ready for departure. They had made it. Mira's heart lifted as the survivors were helped aboard, their faces filled with gratitude. As the ship lifted off, she looked down at the ruined planet below. The Zarn had taken everything from the Valari, but they hadn't taken their hope. And now, thanks to a small crew of determined humans, the Valari would live to fight another day. The stars stretched out before them, endless and infinite, as the Starblade soared into the darkness of space. The mission was over. They had answered the call. And for the first time in a long time, Mira allowed herself a moment of peace, knowing that no matter how vast the universe was, no matter how small they might be, the cry for help had been heard, and it had not gone unanswered.